Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's 30 Under 30 live chat. Today, we'll be talking about the psychology of the coach and the player and kind of the relationships and the dynamics between that. We've got a great panel of young coaches with us here, all members of the current 30 Under 30 class. We're going to go ahead and let them give a brief introduction. Guys, if you just want to give our viewers a little bit of your coaching and playing background, that would be great. We'll start with you, Ellery.
Sure, thanks, Laura. My name is Ellery Gould. I'm the assistant women's soccer coach at Bowdoin College. We're part of the Division III NESCAC League. We are located in Brunswick, Maine. And I'm originally from Massachusetts, but I also did attend Bowdoin College. So I graduated in 2012. I played both soccer and basketball for all 4 years. And I loved it so much that I returned. But since then, since graduating, I had the opportunity to play professionally in Sweden. I played for a team that was based out of Stockholm in the Division II League. After that, I had the opportunity to volunteer in Nicaragua with a nonprofit called Soccer Without Borders. And this is a great organization in Nicaragua. It's specifically directed for girls and teaching them how to play soccer and just using soccer as a vehicle for positive change. So that was an awesome experience. And then after that, I pursued my master's in education. And this was in Durham, England, so University of Durham. And I also got to continue my playing career with the university. And then that brought me back to Bowdoin. So here I am.
Cool. Thanks, Ellery. Thanks again
Yep.
for joining us today.
Yeah.
All right. Michael, how about you? A little bit about yourself.
My name's Michael Herman. I'm an assistant coach at the University of Hawaii in Honolulu, Hawaii. I've been out here for 5 years. Prior to that, I was an assistant at the University of San Francisco. Spent most of my time on the West Coast, played soccer at St. Mary's College growing up, and I've been involved doing a lot with the club game throughout the time, coaching a lot of youth teams, usually in the U14 to U18 age group. And yeah, it's kind of all there is right now. So.
Right. Great. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Richard, how about you? A little bit about yourself.
Hey, Rich Costanzo here, assistant coach at Army West Point. We play in the Patriot League. Originally from Pittsburgh. I played my college soccer at the University of Maryland. I then played in USL for 5 years before getting this assistant job. I also have a youth soccer company out of Pittsburgh Soccer Academy, training youth. So involved with a little bit of everything of all different age groups.
Awesome. Thank you guys again so much for joining us today. I want to remind the viewers, if you have any questions for our panel, go ahead and tweet them to us using the hashtag NSCAA Live. And again, sorry, my name is Laura von Stockhausen. I will be your moderator today. And with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started right with some questions. So our first question, we're going to kind of open to everyone. And Ellery, I'm going to start with you. What are the most important components you value in regards to the team and individual psychology? Kind of a good broad question to start this conversation going. And again, Ellery, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, so I think psychology is super important, especially at the collegiate level. You spend a lot of time training at practice, training your body physically, tactically with the game of soccer, but a very important part is definitely the mental side of soccer. For me as a coach at Bowdoin, I think the most important part of that is team cohesion. You can have a group of 25 girls who have the most skill, have a lot of athletic ability, but I think the most important part of that is sort of that cohesion and team chemistry and how the girls work with one another, how they trust one another, and how also the coaches are a part of that with the trust factor. So trying to get a collective group of young women to work together towards a common goal, and just setting the standards from a mindset perspective and then also on the field, and those go hand in hand. So I think we do spend a lot of time sort of on the mentality piece of soccer.
Yeah, those are some great points. Mike, how about actually, let's go to Rich. Rich, you first. Rich, what are some of your kind of thoughts on that?
A couple things that come to mind is just the mental toughness aspect of the game, and also just leadership. I think a big part is getting the team to understand what you want out of the group, what your goals are, roles of the players, and just introducing those things first to the team, so then they're on the same page, and you can start to develop that leadership, so then the players become more aware of what's expected of the group and can kind of enforce and self-manage the group with the team. So we're big into leadership here, obviously at West Point, one of the premier leadership development institutions in the world. So our guys have a good grasp of leadership techniques, and we bring those over to the soccer side, and we really harness that with leadership group training, bringing in the guys, open dialogue amongst the players and the coaches. That's are a big part of it for us.
Right. Yeah, leadership is key in using the mentality of your players. I think with each other is also a big part of that. And like you said, growing leaders is huge. Mike, how about you? What are your thoughts on the psychology of the team, the individual? What are some of those important components?
I think what both Ellery and Rich touched on was the mentality of the group, and I think that being able to really manage that and understanding the mental skills needed to be able to balance things, because you talk about individual and group. We want individuals that are competitive. You want players that have that mentality to get after it and work hard and compete consistently and really challenge not only themselves but the other members of the team. And I think having that understanding of the group dynamic and being on the same page of understanding we're working towards this goal and we need each other to get it, that allows players to really have a balance of we're going to challenge each other, but then once we're off the field, we're working towards a common goal together. And I think Rich touched on it a little bit with the leadership. You have to have, some strong leadership qualities around you to really keep that in focus. Whereas we're working hard and we're going to compete and challenge each other, and sometimes it's going to be hard. But does that balance out when we're chasing our team goals and our group goals at the end of the day?
Sure. Ellery, now Rich and Mike talked about those team goals, maybe the kind of the individual leaders and how that can affect the mentality or the psychology. What are some specific areas that you guys kind of see that affect those strengths, or affect hopefully closing the deficiencies in certain areas of that mentality and kind of overall psychology of the team?
Yeah, I think they both made really strong points regarding this, and I think something that we do at Bowdoin is we meet with individuals, so we find that a lot of one-on-one meetings, where we get to know people not just on the soccer field, but also know what courses they're taking and, kind of what their individual goals are, what's going on socially with them, and just kind of learning more about them as individuals and their backgrounds really helps us to understand what motivates them, what drives them, why they are on this team, and why they want to be a part of Bowdoin women's soccer, and getting to know our players better off the field has made us better coaches, because we can now design practices around ways that we know that they'll be motivated and inspired to be there. And then also just preparing for games, we think game preparing is very important. So knowing that some players might need those extra words of encouragement, while others kind of want their alone time before the games. And just kind of understanding how a group of 25 plus people can come together and collectively hone in on one common goal, but also understanding the needs of each individual. So we do a lot of meetings, individual meetings, a lot of group meetings, and we revisit those meetings throughout the whole season.
Yeah, definitely. I think understanding the whole in any situation makes it a lot easier to kind of hone in on those individual parts that can affect all those little mindset tricks or whatever may be needed. Rich, I was wondering if I could come back to you and kind of ask you if you could elaborate maybe a little bit on some of those leadership training or ways of identifying. You mentioned going to a school like West Point, you have probably are not short of leaders, but how do you utilize that, and how do you identify those leaders the most?
There's two main ways that we really incorporate the leadership and the sports psychology part of the game. One is we meet every year with Rob Keogh, who's obviously an NSCAA guy, and he also has the Winning Ways program.
Mm-hmm.
So we meet with them, and I've been actually meeting with Rob since I was at the University of Maryland. He was a common figure around there, really inspirational guy to the teams and to the individuals. So we meet with Rob at least twice a year, and it really gets the mindset right of the players and help build that culture, help build a winning culture and all the mental aspects of the game and the roles of the players. That is a major piece, and also we have a Center for Enhanced Performance here at West Point, and it's a place where the players can get in there, they can practice their mental skills, they can do stuff like imagery, with imagery scripts, for the individual. We also do imagery scripts for the team, the visualization before the games, envisioning everything you're going to do on the field, the crowd, etc., is in that script. Other things are just multitasking. There's different methods that Dr. Coleman, who works with us here at West Point, he incorporates where you're doing multiple things at once and just trying to stay focused and focus on the task at hand so that you can accomplish the goal, simulating what's going to happen on the field with many different factors coming into play.
Sure, preparing them on and off the field for all those situations. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Awesome stuff. We're going to move on a little bit. I think that was a great way to kind of get the ball rolling and hear everyone's insight on that. Mike, I'm going to come to you for this next question first. How do you approach your mentality as a coach when it comes to your team's mentality? Is it the same? Are you going to be always kind of having the same mindset as the players? How important is it to tap in, to tap out, all those good things? We'll kick you off with your thoughts on that.
I think it's kind of funny. Like, that's in a way one of the challenges of being a coach is almost, without fail, your mentality is almost always, I've found at least, different than your team's mentality.
Sure.
There's a reason we've dedicated our lives. I mean, the three of us are all college soccer coaches. We do this for a living. This is what we do. So our mentality when it comes to soccer and to playing the game is one of those that's, at times, it's almost way more than kids that are playing in college. And some of them, especially on the women's game, on the women's side, there's not as much of a future for it, as far as the professional game is not as expansive as the men's game is right now, and even some of our top players don't continue playing. So trying to balance that mentality of always wanting to compete, always wanting to win, because for us it's our livelihoods. I think understanding that you have to kind of meet the players in the middle sometimes, because they don't always understand that expectation and that level of intensity that maybe we approach it with. And just finding ways, it ties a little bit into what we've been talking about of having that group mentality and finding ways of each person's going to bring their own piece to the party, and what are they bringing. Our head coach here at Hawaii, she talks a lot about when we have food is a big thing in Hawaii. So we talk about it. When you go to a party, you can't have everybody bring rice, because what kind of party would that be? Now, in Hawaii, that'd actually probably still be a pretty good party. But for us, it's more about trying to make sure each person's individual pieces are brought to the table, and that they can bring their characteristics and their mentality and find a way for them to go forward. And I find that a lot too at the club level of, you've got some kids that want to play in college, you've got some kids that have no desire to play in college, you've got some kids that are, I want to play D1 and that's it, and then you've got some kids that are, I just want to play and I don't really care where I go. So being aware, and that's where it really, as a coach, you have to be aware. And I think one of the things we had done one year that was really good is we had notebooks for each player, and they could write in their notebook their thoughts, their feelings. So we have a group dynamic of, we use a sports psychologist. We're fortunate enough to have that opportunity, but she also doesn't reach everybody the same way, because not everybody wants to engage with somebody one-on-one and have that discussion. So giving them a theater to express their thoughts and their feelings through that notebook, to me, it was something that was really good for us, really developed relationships with each individual player and gave us an understanding of, okay, this is how this player feels and how this made them feel, without necessarily forcing them to put that out in front of the group, which at times can be difficult.
Yeah, those are some great points. Rich, how about you? What are your thoughts on keeping your mentality aligned with, but maybe separate from the teams, and what that can look like sometimes?
I think the group needs to know specifically, expectations, level of play, fitness level, just the way the team is going to play and operate. But it varies, as the season goes on. The things that change, whether you need to pick a guy up or you really need to get on a player to, be working harder. These kind of factors, come into play throughout the season. So it's kind of getting a gauge, and I like what you said about the notebooks there, Mike. I think that's a pretty good tool to use. We use more of the leadership groups and that open dialogue, talking with players to see where they're at, or that leadership group can, speak on behalf of somebody that's not within the leadership group if they feel, they're not being evaluated appropriately or whatever the case may be. You have those leadership groups to facilitate for the other players and get a gauge of the atmosphere of the team, the chemistry, who's getting along, who's not.
Sure.
So I think that's a big part of it, and then you can either ramp up or pull back or whatever you need to do to get the team aligned so that everyone's pushing in the right direction all together, working as one.
Sure, I think those are some great points again, Rich. Thanks for that. Mike, I'm going to come back to you with a little bit of a follow-up question, and Rich and Ellery, you as well, feel free to jump in on that if you have any thoughts. In terms of kind of having the mindset and the psychology of a coach being different from a player, whether that's finding different values in a loss that, the players might not be able to see, but you as a coach can see, well, this is what we gained from maybe losing that match, but overall it'll make us better. But so some specifics kind of thoughts into that, and maybe how you as a coach can separate things and need to separate things differently than the players might. But also, I think one of the great things about having you three on this panel is you're all young coaches that, have the playing experience and were maybe playing not so long ago, and the challenges and maybe benefits to being younger, I think we can all relate to. It gives us a unique mindset and mentality, and kind of the pros and cons to that. Sorry, it's kind of two parts, and they don't necessarily relate. But your thoughts on maybe being able to separate that player and coach mentality and doing it as a young coach, especially.
Yeah, I mean that's important. I think a lot of times the staff you have around you. I'm an assistant, but I think when you're a head coach, sometimes you might be a little bit harder, and then having an assistant that can come in and pick up the pieces a little bit and put it together, and obviously the head coach carries the hammer, and the assistant coach can be there to soften it up a little bit. I think what Rich had talked about in terms of the leadership group and the goal setting and having clear goals helps with that. Being able to come away more to the first part of your question and say, okay, hey, we lost, but look at what we've done and taking steps towards our ultimate goal, to put it in perspective. And then as a coach, making sure that you understand that too. Yeah, we all hate to lose, but what is our goal as a team? Did we lose to a team that's better than us, but did we play better? Did we execute our defensive game plan better? You have to take that and understand, okay, that for the team has to be some sort of a victory. And it's one of those that I think as a player, you never like to lose. And I know one of the hardest days for me that I've had as an assistant coach was when I was playing in on a practice. We were short some kids, and my team was losing. I was so frustrated to be in that situation and just be losing that. Then you have to remember again. Like you said, we're all young coaches, and it hasn't been that long since we played. We still have that competitive fire.
Right.
but understanding the process and the goals and the ultimate outcome that you want to achieve helps a lot, because it keeps the psychology and the mentality of the team in the right focus.
Sure. Now, Ellery, you got a double whammy. You're a young coach, and you're at your alma mater. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Michael made some really great points. I think adding onto that, one thing we really focus on here at Bowdoin is controlling what we can control. We're all obviously very competitive people. You wouldn't be at this level if you weren't. But we think of it more as goals that we have set for ourselves and for our team, and have we accomplished those goals, rather than looking at, did we win this game, did we lose that game? But going back to controlling the controllables, it's more so controlling your effort. You're not always going to be able to control what the calls are made, calls from referees. You might not be able to control the weather, but what you can control is, your communication, your positivity,
Sure.
How well you're working with one another, and the extra effort you put when, you might be down a goal or if you lose possession. So I think we start the season off, and at that first team meeting, we talk about our expectations in this department, and then kind of moving forward, we think about, you're obviously going to have some tough games. You might have a tough weekend. There's some highs and lows throughout the whole season. Academics might be piling up, especially at Bowdoin. We do have a lot of our players are in labs. A lot are taking very difficult classes. So we're aware of that, and we know parts of the season are going to be tougher with a lot of midterms or finals piling up. So I think we talk a lot about how do we respond to adversity, and how do we manage our stress levels, and how do we sort of stay consistent, and also the transition just coming from class to practice, or a lot of times will come from class straight to a game, and how do we all of a sudden change gears and start to focus and concentrate on the game when you were just sitting in a 2-hour class. So we do talk a lot about how to manage our stress levels. We work with a psychologist on campus who's been great. He works with a lot of the teams here, and we just practice mindfulness with him for, we try to do it a couple times a season, and just all get together, and it's a time to relax, and then also just practice imagery and visualization. And I think just taking a step back sometimes and realizing you don't need to be practicing 2 hours every day,
Right.
But take that step back and realize there is much more to sport and to soccer. And then another thing we work on as coaches is the fact that it is a lot in a condensed amount of time, especially with the NESCAC League. It's a very short preseason. You play a lot of midweek games, sometimes Saturday, Sunday games. So we have to be aware of that, and we set up the calendar so that they have 2 days off a week. So this gives them a little bit extra downtime, time to focus on academics, just time away, because we found once they get back, they have a higher level of concentration, higher level of motivation, and then even into the postseason, there isn't as much burnout, or there aren't many injuries and things like that. So we also lay this all out before, so everybody knows what we expect of them, and that we do want them to have some time away from the sport, to stay engaged throughout the entire season.
Sure, giving them that time to recharge, absolutely. Well, great. We're going to go ahead and change topics a little bit and go on to our next question with Rich. I'm coming to you first for this one. How do you balance managing the team psyche with different individuals on the teams and the different highs and lows of the season? What are your thoughts on that, Rich?
I think it goes back to what we're all mentioning, is having a framework in place, something that everybody understands from the onset of the season. For instance, just that players know that there's no guaranteed starting positions.
Sure.
Or, something like that right there is going to help fuel players to continue to work hard throughout the season, whether they're starting or not, hoping for the chance to gain a starting spot. And I think, letting the team know that the team that performs the best during the week is the team that's going to play. So the players that are competing the hardest, showing the most output, are the players that are going to play, not based on your accolades from youth soccer or what you did last season. So I think that's something that needs to be put out there so they know that ahead of time, and then, you know, gauging those things as the training sessions go on. And it's also good to just let the players know that if you're a starter, you're expected to this. If you're a sub for the game, you're expected to do this. You're supposed to, you know, be positive, cheer on your team, be ready to get in. So being there mentally and physically, you know, you have to be prepared if your number is called. And it's just you know, letting everybody know that's for the goodness of the team. That the team has an outcome. We, you know, want to win the, you know, Patriot League championship. You want to compete for a national championship. That everybody has to be pulling in the right directions. Everybody has to be on the same page, pushing every week during training. You know, guys that didn't start last game are pushing those starters this next game. This is how everybody gets better. The team gets better as a whole.
Sure. So I think you're kind of saying is creating those expectations, making them really clear early on so that hopefully the season is maybe a little bit more consistent with the highs and lows and being able to manage it from kind of out front. That's some really great points. Ellery, how about you? What are your thoughts on kind of managing the team psyche and whether it's individuals or, you know, kind of the different ways this season? Don't forget to unmute yourself, but
Got it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think what Rich was saying about just, you know, every week you're going to have probably new players on the field, new faces, and every day at practice as coaches we are evaluating each player, each individual, and you know, going into the games, we even for warm-ups, we don't typically announce who's starting until right before the game.
Wow.
And we also do try to use a lot of our players in games as well. This past year we tried to use around 20 per game. I know that's not realistic for every game, but I think the more players we can get involved in each game, the more that they become invested in the game and practice. It keeps our practices a really high level. It's very competitive, but it's a healthy competition. You know, if you're out there working your hardest and showing us that you're ready to move to the next level and, you know, gain that starting position, then we will reward it to you. We're not setting a starting lineup the beginning of the season and sticking with it throughout. You know, it's evaluating and reevaluating throughout the season, but then I think it's also implementing an open line of communication with your players. I think especially in the women's game, it is ultra important to know where you stand on a team and what your role is on a team. So we try to be very open and honest with our players. We do try to have a lot of individual meetings and just say, here you are in the depth chart. This is what we see you performing really well in these categories, and then we think you can improve upon these. And we just try to, again, be very honest and try to meet with our players as much as we can, just so we're all on the same page. And I think, you know, keeping every individual involved as possible is super important. We make sure that all of our players can travel to away games. We make sure, you know, we have team bonding and team chemistry activities that aren't on the field, and we require that all our players attend because we think, again, it's good to get to know one another off the field. So I think, again, a lot of check-ins, a lot of just open lines of communication are super important.
Yeah, great stuff. I hear a lot of, you know, communication, consistency in terms of your expectations and rewarding or punishing, I guess, those expectations. So yeah, some really great stuff. Ellery, I'm actually coming back to you for this next question, which is talking about the recruiting process, and maybe is there any way that you can, during the recruitment, you can gauge that mentality, or what are you looking for in terms of a player's mentality when you are going through that recruitment process? I'm sure it's pretty specific to each program, but kind of curious what you know, what you guys are doing, what your insights are on that.
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot that goes into recruiting at the college level. You know, oftentimes you're recruiting not even that many players that are for the incoming class of first years. So you really want to get to know that individual, both as a soccer player and as a person, before really committing to them. So at least at Bowdoin, we do look at the individual as a student first. You know, we want to see that they're taking a challenging course schedule and excelling with those classes. We also want to see how involved they are with the community, and seeing that they have been able to take on a lot and have proven that they can handle time management, because especially once you get to the college level, you just don't have that much time, and the commitment to soccer, along with several classes and extracurriculars, is quite demanding. So we do want to see that they have excelled and have risen above in a lot of different categories in high school. And then as far as, you know, watching and attending these showcases, we see and hear from so many different girls. So for me, you know, this is my second year recruiting, and I'm obviously looking for girls who are athletes, who are competitors, you know, have the technical and tactical ability to be able to play and contribute right away. But then I'm also looking at, you know, how coachable they are, how they interact with their coach, you know, how they show respect for their teammates. If they're leaders, going back to leadership, that's very important. So how they talk to their teammates, are they vocal leaders? Do they lead by example? You know, you're also looking at, again, how they respond to high pressure situations. You know, again, if they lose the ball or a bad call is made against them, how do they react to that call? So it's a lot of the intangibles that I think set apart people that we're recruiting as prospective student athletes. And then on that, I think too, just when they do come to campus and, you know, we get to meet them in person and they get to meet our players, maybe they attend a class, we also just like to observe and see how they interact with, you know, their parents who bring them there and our girls on the team, because I think you can learn a lot about a person just by observing them.
Right.
We don't do any sort of psychology test or anything like that, but we do just try to get a good sense by communication and then just kind of observing them on campus. So.
Morning. You guys are always watching. Man, never
Yeah.
the hide sometimes.
Yeah.
Mike, how about you? What are your thoughts on you know, looking at player mentality during the recruitment process?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously it starts when you watch the players play. We go out, like Ellery said, to the showcases or to any game that they're playing in. And, you know, one of the things for me that I like to do is I watch the player before, you know, if there's a specific player that we're looking at on a team, we try to watch what they do before they get the ball and then what they do after they get the ball. And, you know, so often you get in that habit of just sitting and watching where the ball goes and what somebody does with the ball. But, you know, as a striker, if they shoot and they miss, is their head down? Are they totally dejected? Are they upset that, you know, now, oh, I totally missed my one opportunity? Or is it like, that's all right, give me the ball again?
Yeah.
You know, how is it more of a frustration with themselves, or is it like, oh, I'll never score? You know, as a midfielder, are they looking constantly to find the ball? I think every program wants that playmaker, that midfielder that can create. But you know, do you have a player that's wanting to come to your institution that plays that position, that wants the ball, that searches it out, that tries to find it as often as possible, or do they just kind of float and find the ball when it happens to come to them? I think the players that take charge are the players that are going to be successful at the next level when, you know, everybody's athletic, everybody's competitive. Are you doing the little things to separate yourself from the rest of the group when it comes? And similar, like talking about leaders, are they picking teams up? Are they getting on their players in a negative way when they make mistakes? Are they chewing their teammates out? If they get a coaching point from their coach, are they totally put off, or do they talk back to the coach? Those are obviously the immediate ways you can gauge it. Do they work defensively? Do they chase people down? I had seen a kid, I mean, we signed a kid where we'd seen her chase somebody down from one 18 to the other 18, and that player was a national team kid, and she said, "You're not beating me to the other end." And I said, "Done. I want that kid." To me, I didn't need to see anything else. And I think sometimes that mentality is important because you know those players are going to work. They're going to improve. They're going to get better at the end of the day. They're not going to settle for just being, oh, I got my scholarship, I don't need to play anymore. I don't need to travel or compete. I'm all set. And then we're starting so early, especially at the Division I level. We're starting to recruit kids in their sophomore year of high school, and it's something that you spend time really getting to know these kids. And I think we have to be careful we don't do it too fast, but that you really take the time, and especially in an institution like Hawaii, where we're 3,000 miles away from the nearest,
Sure.
other city other than the state of Hawaii. Trying to make sure that you have a kid that's mature enough to be able to handle being 3,000 miles away from family and having to take long flights and miss a lot of school because of the travel schedule that we have. And I think spending time talking to coaches. Finding coaches that you trust that can tell you, hey, this is where she's at when she's at practice. This is how she leads the team. This is how she's an example setter. All those pieces come together to really give you a good picture of where that player's at.
Yeah, I think those are some great points. You guys both talked about a lot of those intangibles, some on the field, some off the field, but both are absolutely important, especially when looking at it as with the player as a whole. Awesome. I think we've got time for about one more question, and Rich, I'm going to come to you first. It's another kind of one of those broader topics, so I think probably will be a good point to get in those last thoughts on our conversation. How do you feel the culture and team psychology relate? Where does team culture start and team psychology end, or where do they, come together, and how does that all wrap up into this interesting topic of the mentality and psyche and psychology of teams and coaches?
I think a big part of it is just a common goal, common ideas amongst the team. How the team's going to work, what's expected. And, at times we've sat down with the team and go over exactly what do we want to accomplish this season.
Sure.
Where do we want to be at by the end of the season, and it's funny, if you do, at one point when our culture wasn't where it's at now, we did this, and you had the range of players who are saying they want to win a national championship, and then you have players saying, oh, we want to win 7 games. So right there, if everyone's on the same page, different expectations, there's going to be a different work rate, different mentality from a guy that wants to win 7 games to a guy that wants to win a national championship. So it's getting everybody on the same page, headed in the right direction, and a big part of that is back to the leadership. So the guys that are been a part of the program need to pass that stuff on to the incoming guys. They need to know right away, hey, we want to compete for a Patriot League championship. We want to make a run national championship. That's what's expected here. You're expected to work hard every day. You're expected to be on time. You're expected to go to class. All this stuff. And that's what I like about really instilling that in your players, because then it's a self-governed thing by the players, where it's passed on, year in and year out, and we can kind of manage it. But the more that we can have the players do it, I think the more effective it is, and I think the more it gets a lot of stuff done easier and more effectively.
Sure. Now, Rich, being at a school like West Point, you guys obviously have kind of a campus culture all its own. Does that make it easier to build your own culture, with maybe unrelated to the winning aspect, but just kind of that team bonded culture, or is it helpful to have assumingly some more like-minded maybe individuals that are attending your university, and how does that kind of affect the overall team culture?
No, definitely. I think these guys take all kinds of leadership classes and do a lot of things, team building, so it transcends over. So it is I would say it's a helpful piece, and a lot of the stuff they live by on their day-to-day college life, they bring here to the team as well.
Perfect. How about you, Michael? What are your kind of thoughts on the team culture and how that connects to the team psychology, and how do you build that culture?
Yeah, I think it's really intertwined. I think it's something that you don't have a lot of. Your psychology really reflects your culture.
Sure.
If you have a culture that's encouraging, a team culture that's encouraging a competitiveness, you can do a little bit more with that psychology of building the competitiveness. Richard talked about it with the setting goals and setting expectations. That to me is the culture, and then the psychology is, okay, now how do we bounce back from difficulties to make sure we get to these goals still. So setting your expectations in the culture and the feeling of where you want to go and where you want to be, and then really working as a group to get to that. I think your question to Rich was great in terms of, I think obviously West Point's a little bit different of an institution than what the rest of us are at, but I think, one of the things we've learned here in Hawaii is the culture here is different.
Yeah.
You can't bring the same kind of kid to Hawaii that you can bring to, UCLA. It won't work, and that's one of those things like, oh yeah, they might not be great for you, but they're going to be great for us. And so understanding the culture, not always just of the team, but of the area that you're in, or because that reflects the. To bring players in that understand that, and then that can address the psychology, and I think trying to really build one with the other. I think Rich talked about it early in the conversation of the leadership groups. I think that's a great way, and he kind of touched a little bit on it, but understanding if you can have leaders that you trust now, that are your upperclassmen, they can start grooming your underclassmen. Once you've got your culture to a point that you want, now you build those leaders from within in the mindset of the culture. You're not just trying to recruit leaders that are leaders in their own right. You're building leadership based on your team culture, and trying to build that from your freshmen, and then moving them on up to sophomores, juniors, seniors, where they're doing the same. And I think it really, once you get that good culture, that's gonna it becomes a machine. It just keeps churning out the same kind of kids, and that's where you find sustained success ultimately.
Great points. Awesome. Ellery, how about you? What is team culture like for you guys, and how do you build that and sustain it?
Yeah, I mean, I think team culture and psychology are directly related, and I do think it is something that is built upon each year, and it does take a few years to build a team culture, and I think it's something that we as coaches, we are and should be actively trying to facilitate and get our girls to think about how they can personally and as a group affect team culture, and what they can do to sort of help shape that into what they want it to be. And it should be an organic process and something that they really believe in too. I think sometimes coaches, we can lay out what we see as our team beliefs, our team values, sort of what our attitude should look like, but I think too it does have to come from our leadership group, so the captains that we can trust, that will then kind of relay and just start modeling what our team culture should look like, and getting the underclassmen on board. And it is a process, and I think the next step in recruiting, you do look for players who are on board with what your team culture is all about. And I think too the psychology part of that is crucial, because you want players who have the mentality, depending on what your team culture is, to adopt it and just believe in it and trust it and want to be a part of it. And it does have to come from the head coach, the assistant coach, the captains, the new players. Everybody has to be on board for it to really work and for you to get the results that you want. And I think it comes down to the attitude that our captains, I think that, again, the open line of communication with our captains, with them telling us how the team is doing and, how they feel physically, how they feel mentally, and then for us to kind of gauge that, and then us designing and preparing practices that will prepare them for the game. But also, I think a big part of just being a part of a college team is preparing them as individuals to go out and think about what they're going to do post college.
Sure.
So we do spend a lot of time preparing them, and also making them think about, okay, how does this apply to situations in life or in business, or in the future with families and friends and socially. So we think that sport is a great way to develop these psychology skills and mental skills, and they're going to be skills that these girls have for their entire lives. Just looking back as a collegiate athlete, you have to sacrifice so much. You have practice almost every day. You're trying to juggle so many things with class, and maybe you're applying to jobs or internships. And just being a college athlete, you do have a lot of pressure on you, but it's how you manage that pressure, how you support your teammates, how you look to your teammates, to your coaches. And I think just being a college athlete, the whole experience is just an awesome experience, and it will prepare you well for what's next in your life too. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those are some great points, and we've talked about a lot about setting expectations and setting ways of maintaining those expectations, and I think everyone can kind of agree that the culture, the psychology, the mentality, it all kind of stems from consistency with coaching and communication and all that stuff. So really some great points and topics today. I want to thank Mike, Ellery, and Rich for joining us, and thank you all the viewers for joining in. Don't forget to tune into our next live chat coming up, and visit nscaa.com to find out all the updates on news and events and educational offerings and everything you need to know, and keep your summer scheduled with nscaa.com. Ellery, Rich, Mike, thanks again. You guys were awesome. We look forward to speaking with you guys in the future. Thanks again, viewers. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Laura.